Welcome to episode 16 of Distraction, where I distract you with the things that have been distracting me in and out of quarantine, whether that be movies, TV shows, books, or music. This week, I'm going to give you a few recommendations. I've got a few little points of news, and sadly, after Ian Holmes passing, the actor who played Bilbo, and he was also in Alien, I decided to watch all the Lord of the Rings, and I have some things to say about that. I'm going to go through a little bit of, I suppose you could say, the history of the book, like of the actual story. I'm going to go through some behind the scenes of the films because that's what I always find most interesting. And then I also have an extra DVD that is about Gollum, which I will get into later. So it's going to be a little taste of everything. And if anyone likes anything in particular, I might do a broader episode on it because lots and lots of my friends are really into Lord of the Rings. We've watched it since we were young, sat and watched the full extended edition 12 hours where marathons where you just sit and watch every single one. But yep, so that's come. But first, I have a few recommendations. Once again, Louis Theroux has come through with a fantastic podcast between him and Chris O'Dowd. And I'm only halfway through it as of recording. But it's really, really interesting. It's about Chris O'Dowd and where he came from, why he started acting, because he is a writer now. And him and Louis are actually quite good friends, so it's a bit of a change of pace from other episodes of the podcast, because normally it's him interviewing people he's never really met before. But now it's him talking to one of his friends, so it's much more casual. You just feel a bit more, I don't know, a bit less stressed. And I was watching other episodes, it does feel a bit of tension, because you know these people, he's maybe asking questions that they're not used to people asking. But yeah, that's out on anywhere you get your podcasts, as is this, by the way. If you are watching this on YouTube, sorry there's no video this week, but it's so hot in this room I look disgusting, so sorry about that. But it is now available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you prefer to go and listen over there. A little recommendation that isn't any of the listed above that I say at the beginning of the story, at the beginning of the podcast, is Casetify phone cases. And yes, I have seen a lot of YouTubers use these. I've seen a lot of them do brand deals for them, but I recently got a new phone because I smashed my other one, and I got a Casetify case, and it brags that this sounds like an ad read, but it's genuinely not, obviously. But you can drop it from like 2 meters, and I haven't tried that specifically, but I have dropped it, and the phone is in absolutely fantastic shape. And for someone who claims they never ever need Apple Care but has broken most of his Apple devices, I think it's absolutely fantastic. So if you've just got a new phone, definitely recommend getting one of them. Also, let's think of some of the recommendations for TV. I mean, Rick and Morty came out, but I wasn't really going to talk about that because bit disappointed with the new season. I'd be interested to see what other people thought. I had a chat with it about one of my friends, and we talked about we think it's sort of catering towards that 12-year-old wannabe edgy audience a bit, and it's sort of taking a dive out of story. I don't really feel like, and obviously Dan Harmon's still on it. I'm not sure how much he's part of it anymore, but yeah, I don't know. I was a little bit disappointed, and of course, there's only 5 episodes on Netflix. I'm gonna say that for anyone who is gonna go and watch it, because that definitely not upset me, but it was a real shame because like I was like just sort of getting into it, and I was like, all right, this is all right. Like I'm excited to see where this goes. Episode 5 fucking stopped, and I was like, well, I suppose that's fair because I wasn't really interested in any of the others. But yeah, so that's like maybe TV recommendation. On Netflix, Mamma Mia and Mamma Mia 2 have just been added, as has The Truman Show. The Truman Show might have been added for a while, but I've only just seen it on there. All fantastic films. Mamma Mia is my guilty pleasure. I'm actually making a video essay about it, which I'm going to hopefully post on my Go Prandle channel soon. So go and check out all of those films. But this podcast isn't really about recommendations. I have many in the past if you do want more. And next week I'll have even more, because this week I'm really going to try and focus on catching up on some of my streaming services, because I've missed out on a lot of films. And there are lots of new films as well. Such as the Eurovision one that Will Ferrell's just brought out. And also on July 3rd, Disney Plus is bringing out Hamilton. It's not like the movie, it's the film of the stage performance, but it's a movie, but it's on, I don't know, I'm really excited for it. So that's coming out on July 3rd, as well as they're adding Frozen 2 to Disney Plus. I know that might not be something my normal audience is really that into. But I actually quite enjoyed the first Frozen movie. I thought it was quite good. And I know it just is like, and I know people see it as like, oh, this big cash grab. But fun fact for that, if you ever want to impress your friends, Frozen makes more money for Disney per year than the entirety of Marvel. That's something I learned at university. Their like sales in merchandise and DVDs and shit like that actually makes more money than Marvel for Disney, which is absolutely astonishing. I've heard Frozen 2 isn't that good, and I've also heard it's just as good if you enjoyed the first one. So I'm pretty excited about that. But that comes out on the 3rd with Hamilton on Disney Plus. Couple other little updates for people who listen to this normally do the same things as me. So Showcase Cinemas are opening. I don't know. I was talking to one of my friends from Newcastle, and she hadn't heard of it, so I don't know how widespread they are. But if you have a showcase near you, they're coming out with so many cool films to go and see at the cinema when it first opens, such as like The Dark Knight Rises, Dunkirk, Mamma Mia, La La Land, The Shining, Pulp Fiction, like some really cool historically important films. So if you have the chance to go and see any of them, I would definitely say you should go and do it. And a little update on Cineworld, they're now opening on July 31st, mainly because lots of good films have been, what's the word? Like things like Tenet and Mulan have been moved to an August release, so they're not going to open in July when there's actually no films. They're not going to pull a showcase and post old films, so they're actually going to open on July 31st. So if you were waiting to get out to the cinema, if you're waiting to see some new films, it might be a bit longer, but I wouldn't worry too much. And finally, the new Animal Crossing update. If you're listening to or around the time of release of this podcast, I think the new update comes out on Monday, and it's the Deep Sea update, which, if anyone is familiar with the older games, such as the one on the 2DS, 3DS, most people have, it's one where you can dive into the sea, you can go diving, and what was some? There was. I don't want to spoil it, you know. So, and also because I can't quite remember, but there was lots of things. If you just go on the Twitter, if you go on Tom Nook Twitter, there's a small video of what's coming out, and it looks absolutely fantastic. I was really excited for it. Um, and yeah, new Animal Crossing update. I'll probably do another Animal Crossing podcast one day soon, 1 week soon, because I have now got. I don't know if I had a 5-star island in the last time I made an update video, but I have now, and I have loads of cool shit, and lots of people, both my friends and also lots of Twitch streamers which I watch, have all been going through a bit of fatigue with Animal Crossing. I've seen sort of waves of Animal Crossing where like people with Switches, I've seen a wave of people who bought Switches at the beginning. Then I feel like there was a big wave near Christmas when my friends got Switches, most of them. Then there was a wave when Animal Crossing first came out, and those people are now probably burnt out on Animal Crossing because, like, if you're like me and my friends, we put like 300 plus hours into it, which is just absolutely insane. But like, it was really fun, but obviously it just gets a bit repetitive and a bit boring. But with this new update, I think it will draw that original audience back. Even lots of my friends have started going on it more, and we haven't bought turnips recently because we're waiting till when the new update comes out. So then when we buy turnips, because we know we're going to be on every day, try to get all the new collectibles from diving, and I think there's a few more NPCs that will come round. If you don't know the NPCs, that's like Sahara or Gulliver, things like that. They'll be coming round. I can't quite remember the name, but I've got one in my head who's joining. But if you have Animal Crossing, that's really exciting. You should be excited for that. Oh, and also the 4th wave or 3rd wave, whatever wave I got up to, is also, I've noticed lots of people and lots of my friends buying Switches after they finish their like dissertations and finish their exams for uni. So that was like in the last month, and I've seen lots of them getting Animal Crossing, which is even cooler because obviously they get to go through all of the original stuff, and now they have this big massive update. So they'll have even more to do, so they probably won't get burnt out for quite a while. But yeah, your Animal Crossing update, if you are interested in that, I'll probably do one in like 2 weeks' time so I can get a grips, hopefully fill a few things out, fill out my museum a bit more. Because actually, I think I went in today, and it was the first time in a long time, and I filled like seven new donations. They were all Beatles. It's like Beetle season at the minute. So I have finished the museum part. I finished the museum part of the museum. No, I finished the fossil part of the museum, which I thought was going to be the hardest, but then in retrospect, it was probably the easiest. But So I finished that, but I've not finished any of the others because I only really catch bugs or fish when CJ or Flicker on the island. But like I said, I'll save all of that for another podcast. But we may as well get into Lord of the Rings. So I sat and watched all Lord of the Rings. I was going to try and do... Fuck it. I'll say, if you haven't seen Lord of the Rings, this isn't really going to spoil anything. Obviously, I'm going to talk about moments and scenes which, if you haven't seen it all or you plan to watch it like recently, if you don't want to know anything, maybe not listen on from this, but I'm not going to directly spoil anything. And if I do, I will say spoilers before it. But we all know that Lord of the Rings is a story that revolves around the 19 rings of power, and the owners of these rings then could govern their own sort of races. So like you had the elves, the dwarves, men, and like whoever had the rings of power could dominate power over all of these people. But then obviously there was the wrong one ring of power made, one ring to rule them all. So, and the point of the story is, I'm sure if you listen to this, you know exactly what Lord of the Rings is. But obviously, throughout the films, basically, Frodo has to take the ring to Mordor to destroy it in Mount Doom, to destroy evil, basically. So this is the first time. They're all available on Amazon Prime as well. If you haven't seen them or you just want to catch up, they are available on Amazon Prime completely free with a Prime subscription if you want to watch the regular versions, and if you want to watch the extended, the £3.50 each to rent. I'm saying that because this is the very first time where I've ever actually watched the original versions, because I have misplaced my DVDs. And I didn't want to spend £3.50 on rent, and so I was like, you know what? Just as like a little catch up, I will watch the originals. Was it? See, I listened to a podcast called The Weekly Planet. I'll link it below, and they recently did a podcast about director's editions of films and like collector's editions, where obviously, where often Blu-rays and DVDs will come out where the directors have made longer cuts. They've added scene in. It's like, this is the cut the director wanted, but like we couldn't send to cinemas, sort of thing. And lots of times it's like 10 minutes longer, or it's like 2 minutes long. I can't remember, there was a film recently and it was like, I think it was X-Men The Dark Phoenix, and it was like with an extra 8 minutes. And I bought it. I don't know why I'm saying it like that, because I'm the fucking fool that supported it. And they like discuss whether films really deserve it, because you don't want to go and see a film if you think, well, in 6 months' time they're going to release the cut they wanted to release, like the director's cut on DVD. So it's like, why would I go and see it in cinema when I could wait for the actual release, or vice versa? Why would I buy the director's cut when I've seen the cut that you've put in the cinema? Like, why should I have to pay for you to show me the actual film you wanted to make? But I think Lord of the Rings, possibly the best trilogy ever. I did have a conversation with one of my friends recently about all different kinds of trilogies, and I actually think it is the best trilogy ever after rewatching it. And that's up with the likes of like Jurassic Parks, Indiana Jones, Back to the Future, that sort of thing. And yeah, so first time ever watching it that wasn't the extended edition. And sorry, I keep jumping back and forth. So what I wanted to say about the Weekly Planet when they were discussing director's cuts, this is one of the few trilogies where the film actually does get better with extended editions, but you don't need the extended edition to still feel the full heart of the story. But those extra, I think it's like almost an hour extra for different films. Like I said, I've sat and watched all of these in a row. My friend's one, it's taken about 12 hours. But those extra hours aren't just fluff. They aren't just a deleted scene here. It isn't just like some shit that normal, like some directors put in their films. Like, they really, really help the characters. It really helps you not emphasize, empathize with the characters more. It really helps character arcs. It really helps the relationships within the film. A couple scenes that I did, because like I haven't seen this in maybe 5 years. I've seen a Lord of the Rings. That's probably a lie, maybe 2 years, because I think I watched them in Foundation year. So yeah, probably only like 2 years. But there was a few scenes which I noticed that weren't there. The making of the Jamba spread, which is the elvish bread that get given to the travellers, and it's supposed to be that one small bite of this bread fills a man's stomach, for the rest of the day, whereas the hobbits had eaten like 2 or 3 slices of this bread like fully. That wasn't in the regular cut, because I realised that when you start watching The Two Towers, which is obviously the second film, Sam he's like, oh, would you like lambus bread or lambus bread? And you're like, if you hadn't seen the extended edition and remember that scene, that's like brand new and sort of a joke that doesn't land. if that makes sense. So that was one thing I realised. The other one is when Legolas and Gimli make their bet of who can kill them more in battle. So like when they actually go to battle and start killing people, they count who is getting the most kills. And in again the regular cut, this isn't shown, but I mean I don't think it was unless I just missed it. But then again, in like the Two Towers, I think definitely at the Battle of Helm's Deep, but even in a fight before that, they start making jokes of like, oh, I'm on 16, or you're on this, or I'm on this. Because obviously they have the whole dwarf, elvish, there's history there why they don't maybe like each other, but they do obviously do end up becoming friends, and this is like an ongoing joke sort of throughout the films. But that's also in the extended edition when they say that. But one thing I did want to say about that, when rewatching it, is so fucking cool the way that they do talk about that, because it's like not only is it because like most characters in this are really really worried about what's going to happen, but they're so nonchalant and they're so powerful, they're so strong in their abilities that not only are they not, I mean they are worried, but only can they go to war that they can actually count in their heads how many they're killing and make a sport of it, which I think is just the most badass move ever. I'm not sure any other film has ever had something so badass. But yeah, I thought that was absolutely fantastic. Um, and I was going to talk about the ranking of who I thought the true hero of the film was, and I thought I was like going to be like, oh, like this is my edgy take on the heroes of this film. But it turns out the first one, is it JJR or JRR? I always get that confused. Tolkien basically is actually agrees with me, because I say that from first to fifth heroes of the film, the first one is Sam, not Frodo, and that's because Sam is the one that carries Frodo. He's the one that doesn't give up. Even when he's sent away, he comes back and saves him. Oh, spoilers, sorry. But I mean, it's the whole point of the film that he is the person that supports him. He carries those fucking pans from back end of Middle-earth to fucking Mordor. And it is astonishing, and he is, and it turns out Tolkien also thought that he was the true hero of the film, and apparently it's based on, I do have a few things written down about Tolkien, but it's apparently based on when he was in World War One, and he'd watch soldiers who would just put up and keep fighting and keep doing like the work they had to do, and wouldn't be complaining about it. Supposedly that's where some of the character traits for Sam came from. But my ranking of the heroes in the film are Sam at number one, for obvious reasons that I've just mentioned. Eragon at number two, because he brings the army of the dead, when he brings that to the, sort of spoilers, he brings that to the Battle of the Five Armies, saving the day, and he always just seems to be the one who's just getting shit done, and he's always putting the ring first. He's always putting Frodo first. He's always putting himself in harm's way. And of course, spoilers. Oh fuck it, you know what? I'm just gonna spoil it. So if you haven't seen it before and you do not want to know spoilers, this isn't the podcast for you. But so when obviously he does become king at the end, I think that's just such a glorious moment, and it really, really sets him deep, because I think he is the second hero of the film. And also in the extended edition, I realise that you don't see like what happens afterwards, him growing old, his wife living for longer, him getting set in on the tomb and stuff. That's all in the extended, I imagine. But number three for hero of the film, I put Gandalf, because obviously, again, most of the film couldn't have happened without him. Frodo and Sam basically get on by themselves, but we don't know how much intervention was actually from Gandalf. But lots of the armies and battles were helped, and mainly won by the help of Gandalf, so I think that's fair to put in there. I don't really have to justify why he's the third hero of the film, but yeah. Frodo is fourth, because, I mean, you can't not talk about Lord of the Rings heroes and not talk about the boy who takes it upon himself to actually get the ring to Mordor and destroy it. So I suppose it's only fair that he deserves fourth place. Some people may think he deserves higher, but he's a little cunt throughout, and it is other people. And I know you're going to make the argument that obviously the ring is corrupting him. It is the ring that is like the ring is making him want to not take it there and things like that. But I mean, for that, he is fourth because he does take the burden of it. But like you say, Sam is actually the one that gets him there. He even carries it for a while. He saves Frodo numerous times. He has his wits about him, so that's why Frodo's number four. And number five is Eomer. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm sure I have friends who will jump back immediately and tell me I'm wrong. Eomer is the one played by Carl Urban, which I didn't even realise. He's the head of the Riders of Rohan, and I feel like he's often overlooked. I've never really noticed him before. But I just realised exactly how much he does, how much help he does when he finds Merry and Pippin. And then when he tells Gandalf about. Oh wait, no, he doesn't find Merry and Pippin, does he? He finds Frodo and Sam. Right, now I'm confused. All I know is that throughout the film I was making notes and his name kept coming up, so I'm putting him fifth because he was always there to help a hand. He was always there to do the right thing when people disagreed or people try to use armies and power for themselves. He was always against it. And just the Rise of Rohan really came in and saved everyone's ass. So I put in number 5. And then obviously everyone else underneath. You have Merry, Pippin, Gimli, Legolas, fucking anyone else who helped out is obviously still on that list. But yeah, I thought that was just something really fun to talk about. And I thought I was onto something, but it turns out the whole internet already knew Sam was the hero. Yeah. I mean, I did actually want to get one of my friends on to talk about the memes that were sprung up because of the trilogy, because we have so many ongoing jokes about Lord of the Rings that I'm sure half the other internet have as well, and also you make in-jokes with your friends while watching the film, same with everything, because you're actually sat there watching it and jokes will pop out and you'll find something funny that no one else ever has. So I did want to talk about a few of those, but I'll get that soon. Next thing that I talked about, I sort of went into the mythos of the whole of the Lord of the Rings world and J.R.R. Tolkien's creation, because I talked about it previously about wanting to delve into the legend of certain films and the worlds that they've created. Like Harry Potter's a good one to do it with. Lord of the Rings is a really good one. Star Trek, Star Wars, things like that. And I said I was actually going to try and do it with Lord of the Rings because it's sort of confined. There are films, there are books, there's a few extra essays and stories, so I'll go through it. So the ranking the films for me go 1, 3, 2. I think it's Fellowship of the Ring, Return of the King, The Two Towers, and I think most people might also have that opinion. And the Battle of the Five Armies outweighs Helm's Deep, but both of them are on the top 10 list of battles on screen for me. I just put that in there. So this is a little bit of history about the story, the books, and the creation. If some people didn't know, it was actually originally 6 books. It was 2 books per film that has later been published into one whole book. But yeah, at one point, and even if you research now, you can still get all 6 original editions that make up the whole story, which I found really interesting. I actually didn't know that. Obviously, I already went through what the story revolves around. We all really know. What I didn't know was the universe it's set in is called a Legendarium. It's Tolkien's Legendarium, and this includes other works of books and essays. And Middle-earth is actually on the planet Arda. So Middle-earth is literally just maybe a continent on a planet called Arda, which is in a larger universe called the Legendarium, which I think is absolutely fascinating. And the way that this story was created, lots of people think because of Tolkien's love of language and his use of languages in the films, which I recently found out as well that he was actually really not ashamed of. He thought they were a little bit cringy and he thought they were funny. He didn't think anyone would care. And now some of them have vocabularies, 20,000 words, specific language styles, and you can even study them at universities, which is absolutely astonishing, Elvish, things like that. I know someone who has Elvish tattooed on his arm. It's mental, but there's actually dozens of languages throughout his book, whether that be ones like Elvish with whole vocabularies or whether that be ones where it only have one word. But and so big that lots of people thought that he put these languages in his films because he was really into languages, but what actually happened was he created these languages himself and then created Middle-earth around these languages to set a story, to set a world for these languages to live in. So obviously, so I just think that's really interesting that it was actually the other way around. And if you are interested in the legend of the universe, it was actually created through chanting. Whereas obviously we think our world was created through the Big Bang. The Arda was created through chanting, and there's actually a really, really interesting story of how the Balrog and Gandalf are both part of the same sort of heritage and where they come from. Really interesting. There's so many videos and books about it. Go and research it. It's absolutely astonishing. But yeah, a little bit of history on Tolkien. He served in World War One. But he had trench fever, so it obviously set him away from the front line quite a lot. Like I said, this has influenced him maybe with the character of Sam and some of his characteristics. It's also influenced one scene in particular when Frodo, Sam, and Gollum, they're walking through what it's like a swamp. It's a swamp of the dead marshes sort of thing, and you can see lots of bodies laying in the river. And I think his daughter was the one to point out that she thinks that was actually wrote in reference to some of his time in war, and maybe walking through the trenches, seeing all the dead bodies. That was like a comparison that he put in his film. So there's things like that can crop up all the time, and lots of different things can mark back to it. But yeah, I just thought that was just really, really cool. Lots of interesting things, and I really want to get into the history and the legend of Lord of the Rings because there's so much to dig your heels into. But like I said at the beginning, I'm actually only going to do a little bit of each part of Lord of the Rings, and then I might have whole episodes where I delve much, much deeper. So the next bit I wanted to go behind was the actual films, obviously directed by Peter Jackson, and they were all filmed like at the same time, one after another. It took about a year, maybe even longer than a year, with all the casting in New Zealand for that time. It was filmed primarily in New Zealand. And the budget for the films, all three, was 230 million, which granted at the time in 2001 is a lot of money. Was a lot of money. But obviously now you have single films now, superhero films that actually cost 300 million. So the fact they did that for $230 million, when the technology they were using for, say, Gollum and the Balrog and all of these different things was absolutely astonishing. And all three films ended up making $2.91 billion at the box office. So I guess you could say that it had a good return. Oh, right. So each film on the extended editions also have about hour and a half documentaries that detail the making of the film. Last time I watched all of these was a few years ago, but there was a few things that I do remember from them. But if people are more interested in the behind the scenes aspects of the films rather than the legend of the films, I would be more than happy to do a full podcast about that. But some of the things that I remember happening were Eragon broke his toe in one scene when he kicks the helmet when he thinks Merry and Pippin has died. When he actually kicks the helmet, he breaks two of his toes. So the scream he lets out is him screaming in actual pain. And I also know that Sam, when running into the river, cut his foot on glass. Well, they think it was glass. They couldn't remember if it was glass or they thought it was just part of a broken tree. So that halted filming for a few days. And Orlando Bloom also broke his rib at some point. I know this is a bit shit, but I don't exactly remember when, but I do remember that he broke his rib at some point. I also forgot to point out that the critical response to these films was absolutely overwhelming. All three were nominated for every type of award. They were nominated for around 30 Oscars, and they won 17. If I'm not wrong, Return of the King won Film of the Year it came out, which is absolutely astonishing. So they did so well. But to jump back to a few quick facts about behind the scenes, Aragorn fell in love with the horses that he used on set and ended up actually buying and adopting them and taking them home with him. He was also the only person to prefer the real sword made for his character, not the rubber stunt sword, and he would always carry it around so it was authentic. He would use it wherever possible on set, and if I'm not wrong, he did take it home afterwards, which I think he has all rights to, because he worked it for that long. It became his sword. It was Aragon's sword. It became a part of him, which I think is just really, really cool. Weatr, which is the company that produced everything, like literally everything for the film, whether that be the 19,000 costumes, the probably hundreds of thousands pieces of armor, pieces of swords, arrows, bows, anything you can think of. It was Weatr in New Zealand that created these. And I remember in the documentary on the DVD, it said that often these things they'd call in one evening and be like, right, we need this many daggers for tomorrow, and Weatr would have to work throughout the night to make these authentic looking daggers. And they did so much. It looks like a really, really cool workshop. And while we're on that subject, while I was in the north of Ireland last year, I actually bought a DVD. Pardon me. My friend took us to like this little it was a really cool market, and I bought this Gollum DVD, and it came with a book and a disc, and I've only just watched it. It was called the Smeagol Collectible. So basically, it's like a 25-minute feature on how the collectibles the films were made. So that's like the little statues and things like that. And again, this links back to because Weatr, the one with the people who created the collectibles. And if I'm not wrong, they discussed how the 3D collections in the relation to like film businesses, how they've become a thing. People like to collect 3D collectibles from films. And it's become a culture as much as the movies. Peter Jackson has a massive prop and collectible collection. Even recently now you can go on YouTube and see tours of his collections are absolutely fantastic. And there's sort of three types of collecting collectible figurines where you can buy them like I do, which is like a figurine painted, made, just put it on your shelf. You can also buy them where you just have to sort of glue them together, paint them, make them your own. And then the sets where what Peter Jackson tends to do, he actually gets the molds of these figurines, like from sets, like he collects those. So he makes the original molds himself, then he paints them, puts them on his shelf. So it's like whole types of board games, and it's like a souvenir from the film. Like if you think for years people have watched Lord of the Rings, and Lord of the Rings affects people in so many ways. I have a friend who has the Tree of Gondor on his arm, like I said, and I have a friend who has Elvish written on his arm, tattooed, not just like drawn on. And they are a souvenir of the film, a souvenir of the time you spent with those characters. And Wetter actually made around 200 different collectibles. And this DVD talked about the making of them and how they were so incredibly sculpted. Like they'd go, and it was in the last few months of filming, so they'd be able to go on set and ask the actors. They'd get the actors to sit for them. They'd take pictures of them and like craft these collectibles so directly, and like there was so much detail, and characters such as Ian McKellen and Sir Christopher Lee, they were really, really impressed. Maybe it's like an older generation thing that someone was taking this much time to really perfect it, to really make sure they were doing it well. And they both asked for the collectibles after their statues were so intrinsically designed, because they would sit and talk to them for hours and tell them what was wrong. As well, Eragon, he would apparently go into Wetter Studios, and when someone was painting his figurine, he'd tell them like, "Oh, there's too much blood on that sword. The mud was up here. Like I remember it. These are the marks on my hands where the blood was. Here are the cuts on my hands, so you can have it directly." Like there was so much detail on these figurines. It was absolutely astonishing. But the DVD is about the Smeagol figurine, which is given away. You could buy it as a collector's edition with the first DVD, which I actually saw online recently, and I might have to buy because I now have the DVD to go along with it. And they talked about how the Gollum / Smeagol figures were made mirrored. They made two because obviously he has a dual personality. There's dual characters there, so it's exactly the same situation. He's holding a fish on a rock when he was sat in the Forbidden Pool. So it was Eoma did catch Frodo and Sam, because it's when Gollum was sat in the Forbidden Pool. That's when they chose, and they do two different facial expressions to represent the two different figures, and they could be used as sort of bookmarks. Like, and it's really cool, really interesting. It just shows like even to the point of the collectibles after the film. And like I said, Peter Jackson had his own collectible collection, so he really had a heavy hand in it. He really wanted to be part of it, so that's why they came out so well, and that just shows Wetter's commitment to the shoot. I think it's absolutely astonishing. But yeah, I could talk for hours about that. Talking about shooting, obviously I said it took, I might even be wrong, it could be probably more like 18 months, because it took 4 months by itself to film the battle at Helm's Deep, which all was a night shoot, because obviously it was set in the dark. So like that's absolutely astonishing. Sauron, who was played by Christopher Lee, was the only one who actually met Tolkien, and that happened to be at a bar in Oxford. It wasn't even an arranged meeting. But he was actually cast, not only, but he read, because he passed away, he actually read Lord of the Rings every single year. It was one of his favourite books, and there's even instances of him correcting Peter Jackson on set, which I just thought was so fucking cool. But yeah, and I'll give you a couple final facts. The Return of the King holds the highest record. I watched a video about this, I think it was like 2 years ago, so at the time it held the highest record for human body count in a single movie. of like human death, which I just think is so cool. And also, the whole production actually pumped $200 million into the New Zealand economy, which I think is absolutely fantastic. They even instated a specific chancellor to try and push as many people into the production of Lord of the Rings, to try and give as many people opportunities to work in the business and to fund the economy even more. I think there was something almost 4,000 crew members who worked on the film, and I'm pretty sure it was like 3,000 of them were like production design and artists and like things like that, and that just shows how much was put into this film. I didn't even get onto the technology behind this film with like Andy Serkis's Gollum or the different green screen techniques, but I am going to leave it there because I think this is already one of my longer podcasts. If you did enjoy this, leave a like on YouTube or leave a rate or response on Spotify and Apple. Would really appreciate it, and I might make more of these in the future about films or specifically about Lord of the Rings. Check out my Instagram at GoPrandle. I'm posting more on there. I'm trying to make some little videos, maybe get into some stop motion, play some stop motion videos on there coming out. And thank you for listening to the podcast. I hope you come back next week. So much fun to make, and it really warms my heart when I see people listening and enjoying it. Sorry, my voice is just going because I've been talking for like 35 minutes straight. But thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you next week. Thank you.